And we should understand the stakes. The stakes are huge. Not only do we have a culture that is decomposing in general, but with AI, we have a kind of threat that we've never really seen, at least that we know of in the history of humanity. But this time is an opportunity. And no matter what happens in the next decade, those that have fostered what it is to be truly human are the ones that will come out of it. And so that's the challenge that I pose to all of you.
This is Jonathan Pajot. Welcome to the Symbolic World.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for those that don't know me, my name is TJ Stevens. I'm the headmaster at Chesterton Academy of Ottawa. And we have the honor today of having Mr. Jonathan Pajot joining to talk to us about art. We are, as Chesterton Academy, a classical Catholic academy that have started in 2018 with a split 9-10 class with just 10 students. We've grown quite a bit since then and offer the full complement of classical education in the grades 9 to 12. Our goal at Chesterton Academy is to offer a rigorous program that helps to develop the faith and academic lives of our students. Our arts program in particular is geared towards music, drama, and the visual arts. These allow our students not only to learn the techniques involved in these fields, but also the theory and history that accompanies them. By studying the origins and inspirations of various art styles and modes and masters, our students are then able to express themselves in the same way as the masters did. We are an independent high school, meaning that we do not offer the regular Ontario program. This does allow us to offer a program that is unique in its focus and presentation. The consequence of this is that we are not funded at all by any outside institution, and events such as these are incredibly helpful for us to fulfill our mission of spreading the culture of life to the world. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and showing your support for our school and for Mr. Pajot. This whole event came about from a wonderful story of providence, friendship, and generosity. Mr. Pajot worked as a teacher with our philosophy teacher, Mr. Benoit Muse, at another school years ago. Their paths split, but Mr. Pajot had learned about our school and wanted to offer his enthusiasm and knowledge to help in some way. So this event is the fruit of that generous offer, and we thank him very much for this gift.
Hello, everyone. It's a joy to be here. As was said several years ago, it's a little period in my life that not many people know about. I was teaching art at a small Catholic school here in Ottawa, and so I did that for like 3 years, I think. And so here we are to talk about art, AI, education. We are going to talk probably more about AI than you could say was originally planned, just because there's so much going on in terms of AI. As you know, there's recently the Pope has published his encyclical, and so we're going to look at that a little bit in my talk today. But we're going to ask ourselves this question, which is, what do we do? This computer, this monster is coming and it's kind of taking over the horizon of human experience. They told us, in the past that we need the machines to do all the grunt work so that the artists and the intellectuals can do that, can think about beauty and make beautiful things. But now we're just going to use the AI to make the beautiful things. And we're going to, be the janitors and we'll be fixing the machine itself. And so what do we do? How do we deal with this? These are the questions that we're going to ask. And so one of the great things about the Pope's encyclical, and there might be some things to criticize about it. It's a very long encyclical. There's a lot in there. But for sure, the way that the Pope looks at the question of what AI is and what it isn't, and what a human being is and what a human being isn't, is right on point. It's very good, and it's exactly what it is that we need to hear. And the first thing, in order to think about what do we do, is to understand the difference between what these machines are, what they do, and what we are, and what we do. There's a lot of hype about these machines and these models and how are they conscious? Could they be conscious? Could they, take over the world? Could they succeed us? Right? Could they become more intelligent than us and basically rule over us? One of the things that's important to understand is that these machines are not really intelligent in the way that human beings understand what intelligence is. And this is something we should be grateful that as these machines are being developed, even the cognitive scientists, they're doing their work and they're realizing that these are very different things. What the machine is doing and what humans do are very different. Although the LLMs can impress us with the way that they play with words, with the way they're able to suggest meanings, the way that they're able to generate content and generate images and generate all of that, we have to understand that they have no internal reality. And this is not something that we're just speculating about. It's not that we think that they have no internal consciousness. Is that consciousness is not something that happens only up in your brain. Consciousness is an embodied experience. It's related to my position in the world and the way in which I interact with everything that is coming towards me, the way that I interact with the objects in terms of holding them, interacting with them, eating them, looking at them, banging into them. All of these embodied real experiences are what consciousness is. It's all connected together. And the words that we have, like if I have a word for a hamburger, that word isn't just an abstract signifier, right? It's related to my experience of holding the hamburger in my hand and eating it, the taste of it, the experience of it, maybe the indigestion that comes later. That's what a hamburger is, right? It's something that is an experience in the world. And of course, we can map out the relationships of these meanings, and that is exactly what language does. That's ultimately what the AI is doing, but the AI has no internal reference to what the hamburger is. And that's why if you've used the LLMs, you'll notice that sometimes it's extremely smart, then all of a sudden it's extremely stupid and says just the dumbest, most unreasonable thing that you've ever heard. And it's because they don't have that reference. There's a recent experience that I've seen where someone asked the AI that he says that I would like to wash my car. And the car wash is, 50 meters from my house. Should I drive or should I walk? And of course, the AI says, well, you should walk, right? It's just 50 meters, you should walk. And the person asks again several times, I'm going to the car wash. I want to wash my car. Would it be easier for me, would it be better for me to walk or would it be to drive? And the AI just repeats, doubles down, you should walk. Because it has no internal referent. And so it can do coding, it can do math, it can do all of these wild, very, very difficult processes, but it doesn't know what a car is. It doesn't have that I know what a car is because I drive it. I know what a car is because I can kill myself in the car, right? I can feel the exhilaration. I can feel all of the things that connect the world together. And so that's very, very important to realize at the outset, is that the two are not the same. And so played a little game here. I put the Pope's encyclical into AI and I asked it to generate an image of the difference between AI and humans. But I think the Pope gets it very well. In his recent encyclical, he says, AIs may imitate language, behavior, and analytical skills, or even simulate empathy and understanding, but they do not understand what they produce, for they lack the effective, relational, and spiritual perspective through which human beings grow in wisdom. It's a great statement. It's perfect. It brings together, it already hints at what a human being is, not only at what a human being is, but at what a human being cares about, at what is important for us as human beings. And that's exactly what the AI is lacking, which is the relational, the effective, relational, spiritual perspective through which we grow in wisdom. Right? The friendships, the love, the insight, the surprises, the pain, the joys, all of that, it has none of that. And therefore, it is very much different from a human. But when we see that our society is aiming towards this machine, right, is putting everything in service of the machine, we also have to realize what are the values that they are preoccupied with. What is it that we care about that we are so obsessed with this machine? Why are we putting all our resources, all our energy into this machine if we know that as humans, these are the things that we care about, right? Money, efficiency, power, right? These are things that as humans, we do care about. We do care about those things. We need all of those. But those are not the prime movers of our experience. And when they do become the prime movers of our experience, we run into trouble. So when we see when I read the encyclical, especially the parts that talk about AI and about what a human is and about education, I was very relieved. I thought, all right, we have someone who has a very strong voice in the world, who is able to speak out what is true about this situation. And so in some ways, there is a little bit of relief. It seems like even the AI knows, in parenthesis, the difference between itself and us, although it doesn't know it deeply, at least knows it in terms of what it does. But it doesn't mean that the threat is not real. The threat is absolutely real, right? What it is we're going through is absolutely real. Do you know about the Moloch trap? So this is a game theory concept, but it's a very powerful game theory concept because do you know who Moloch is? Do you remember who Moloch is? Moloch is the Canaanite deity to which the people would sacrifice their children in order to get power. And so there's a thinker who, through different channels, came to this concept of what he calls the Moloch trap. And what the Moloch trap is it helps us understand why we're in this problem, which is that because we worship power and because we worship money and because those are the things that are actually driving our society. Once certain technologies are put out into the world, they have legs of their own. They end up having their own will, not the technology itself. Everybody's worried about whether or not the AI is conscious and is some demon or something like that. It's like, yeah, this is serving a demon, but not necessarily the machine itself. It's the whole process around it. All the rest that's serving mammon, all the rest that's serving power. That's how, in some ways, it has legs of its own and seems to be running without being able to stop it. When you look at the AI CEOs, the people that are making the AI are the same people telling us it's going to kill everyone. How did that happen? How do we have the very companies that are making it saying, hey, everybody, I just want to tell you 20% chance that it's going to destroy everything, just so you know. Now let's keep running. Let's keep running as fast as we can to implement it, although everybody involved knows. Elon Musk said, we need to stop. We need to stop. No, we have to slow down the AI. We have to stop it. And then when nobody listened, what did he do? He started his own AI company, obviously. What else are you going to do, right? It's the only thing you can do. And this is the Moloch trap. The Moloch trap is once a certain power is put out into the world, it serves power. And therefore, the competition between the agents who have access to this power forces us to implement it, even if we know that it could destroy us. The nuclear arms race was an example of that, which is that once that power is put out into the world, even though we know that it could kill everyone, we still have to accelerate. We still have to make more weapons. We still have to raise the stakes so that we stay in competition with our enemies, so that we're not overwhelmed by our enemy. Now, in the case of nuclear proliferation, it took many decades. We were able to slow it down, but maybe there was like 10 people involved in those decisions. Who knows how many people? Very few people involved in those decisions. In the case of AI, it's very different. because everyone has it in their pocket, right? Everyone has it. It's everywhere in every domain simultaneously. Right? So, and it's different even from the Industrial Revolution, because the Industrial Revolution was only in the economic sphere, not AI. The LLMs are being implemented in every single aspect of society simultaneously everywhere, right? And so it's the Moloch traps of Moloch traps, right? There's no bigger version of it that we've seen until now. So, of course, when we talk about education, we can see it. The young people that are finishing college, we told them, go into computer science, right? Learn to code. Well, don't need those anymore. And the same thing is going to happen in pretty much all the industries, which is that all of the beginning jobs, all of the first level jobs are going to diminish, because the people with the AIs are going to become very, very powerful and will be able to have virtual employees. So we're seeing it happen, right? It's happening. And so the danger, obviously, is that power will flow to fewer people. This is one of the things that the Pope calls on in his encyclical, that the jobs are going to dry up, all of this thing, and that ultimately, in a thing that was supposed to serve humans will become, useless or barely useful, right? And so if you want to know if it serves a kind of demon or a kind of evil spirit, that's the way in which it serves a kind of demon or evil spirit. That it is, in some ways, not at all thinking about what is good for humans, what it is that the human cares about, but is kind of running its course towards power and towards money. All right. Of course, as Christians, as people who are thoughtful, we have a different vision of what it is that is important. We have a different vision of what it is that is human. And so, again, in his encyclical, the Pope says the technocratic paradigm threatens to normalize an anti-human vision. In that vision, the fullness of life is equated with having more, reducing weakness, eliminating uncertainty, and exerting total control. When efficiency becomes the ultimate measure of value, human beings are tempted to see themselves as a project to be optimized rather than as persons called to relationship and communion. And so this is a very beautiful way of understanding. And it is, for us, a wake-up call about what it is that we need to do. Because we have to really be attentive right now as parents, as educators, as students, as young people. We have to really be deliberate about what it is we're going to do in the next few years, or else we will be swept aside by these changes. We'll just be completely swallowed up. If you ignore what's happening right now and you go to college to learn a skill so that you can have a job, there is a great possibility that that job will not exist once you finish college. So what do we do? How do we think about this? Now, one of the things to remember is that the idea that education, that learning about literature, that learning math, that studying philosophy, that learning all the things that we learned, that the purpose of that was to get a job, is actually a very, very thin sliver in the history of humanity. It's actually just a few generations, right? Maybe from the beginning of the 20th century until now. Maybe about 100 years we could give it about that. And even that, you could make it after World War II. Basically, from World War II to now, that is the idea that we had of what education was. We need to take these people, make them into productive, skillful workers so that they can be put out into the world in order to make things, do things, make money, generate the economy. And so because it's such a thin sliver, we also maybe shouldn't be too worried about what it is that we should do, because we have thousands of years of history before that to help us remember what it is that education is for. Why did people learn? Why did people go to school? Why did people have tutors? Why did people learn? And the answer was because it was to make good people, to make good citizens, right? So that people could learn to discern good and evil, could learn to be wise, could learn to have a discerning mind, to be able to think clearly and to see clearly in the mess that the world presents us. And we used to call it the humanities. The humanities used to be all of education, pretty much. And then the humanities were just reduced to a point where people didn't even know what they were really for. You would say, oh, you're studying in the humanities? Good luck getting a job, right? You should become a plumber, or you should go into computers, or you should, do something that has a purpose, right? And I don't want to mock, that idea at the time. But what I mean is that it's funny because now we're back at a point where the thing that's going to become the most precious is, again, going to be that deep wisdom that has been handed down to us for thousands of years. So what can we do in terms of education? Why would someone learn art today? Look at what the AI can do in 30 seconds, right? Why would anybody learn to draw? Why would anybody learn to paint? There's no point, right? And the answer is because as we move into the future, and what's interesting is that I've seen now even some of the AI people say this, saying that we're going to see a return of the humanities because the only thing that will move forward with success into the future are people that will have that core, people who will have that inside them, that will have the wisdom, the discernment, the capacity to discipline themselves, the capacity to master, their own thinking and be able to interact with the world, to be able to manage things. Those are the ones that are going to move into the future. So we kind of go back to this idea. So why would you learn to paint? Why would you learn to draw? Well, that's the reason, right? The reason why you would learn to paint, and the reason why you would learn to draw is the same reason why you want your kids to learn music, right? Do you want your kids to learn to play the piano because you think they're going to be professional piano players? No, right? You want your children to learn to play music because there's something in that skill that makes them more human. Right? There's something in the rhythm. There's something in the mastery of their ear, of their eye, of their hands that comes together into something that is the production of beauty, makes them better people. And so from now on, this is how we're going to have to think about not just art, not just music, but pretty much everything that we teach our children. And it's not bad because that's probably what it should have been all this time. That's probably what it should have been, is to think of education as the making of people, the making of virtuous, good, discerning people. For the colorful month of June, we are having a special promotion for our most recent fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood, in which if you get the book, you will also get an audiobook version of it for free. You'll get me reading both the book and the symbolism essay, which in this case is part of the very book. The story of Little Red Riding Hood is so appropriate for now. It is relevant to our situation in so many ways when we have, in some ways, are asking questions about infiltration, about, identity, about who gets to claim what identity and what it means to have someone pretending to be you inside your world and how that can be a dangerous thing to happen. And so, we told our own version, a one that kind of takes it one step further that I hope you will enjoy. So get your book today while this promotion is on. So how do we do this at this moment? I have 3 basic terms that I like to use to talk about what I think we should need to do. I think that right now, especially now, we need to do 3 things. We need to remember, we need to celebrate, and we need to create. All right? Because one of the things that's happening with all of this at the same time is, I don't know if you've noticed, but culture is running thin. Hollywood is falling apart. No one knows what story to tell anymore, right? People just sit there and they scroll Netflix for 30 minutes until they decide they're not going to watch anything because there's nothing interesting out there to watch, right? People are running out of stories. And so that's an amazing opportunity because we need stories. Right? We need to remember. We need to know what to care about. We need to know what's important. We need to know what we should be involved with. And so we have right now an amazing opportunities to speak into chaos and to speak into despair and to speak into a moment where everybody looks around and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. And so what do we mean by remember? In the past 100 years, we have been convinced that culture is entertainment. We have been convinced that culture means you sit in a theater or you sit in a concert hall and you watch music or you listen to music or you watch a movie or you watch TV, right? That we are passive consumers of culture. The stories that we care about, Star Wars and, whatever, like franchise that the world has given us. These are all, fictional stories. There's nothing wrong with fictional stories. That is completely fine. I'm fine with fictional stories. But I think that we are now in a time when we need to remember our stories. We need to remember the stories that brought us here. We have been pushed in the past decades to forget. Have you seen the new passport, right? The Canadian passport? Did you notice that it is an act of forgetfulness? That in the passport is the desire for us to forget who we are, how we got here, who are the people along the line that have handed the baton to the next generation and have brought us here. There has been an aggressive desire to get us to forget so that we can become these peons, so that we can become these infinitely movable dots, on the grid that can be anything, live anywhere, participate in the great, global whatever. But I think that now is really the time to remember. And we are going to be forced to be deliberate about it. No one's going to do it for us anymore because all the forces, and AI is part of it, right, is to make you live in a world of immediate experience that is completely devoid of past, completely devoid of context, right, completely devoid of embodiment. So we need to remember. What should we remember? We should remember our stories. Remember the myths. Remember the fairy tales. Remember the Bible stories, the stories of the saints. It's almost impossible to believe that the number one form of literature in the Middle Ages was the life of the saints. That the things that people read, if they could read, the things that they would copy, that they would publish, that they would pass around, that they would tell each other, what was it? It was the lives of the saints. That was their entertainment, folks. It's hard to believe that in our world. But I think that now is the time to remember. When Christopher Nolan decides to make the Odyssey, it might be controversial what he puts in there. But let's take it from one step removed, which is that they know that people are hungry for remembering, right? They know that people are hungry to watch the Father return home. That's what people are hungry for right now. So don't let them take it away from us, right? Let's remember those stories, right? We need to teach our children as young people, when they say read Homer, it's a treasure. The Iliad, the Odyssey, these are treasures. Dante's comedy is a treasure These things are treasures that will make you better people, that will show you what the world is and will lead you into the future. Right? And so this is now the time to remember. Remember your family story, remember your people's story, remember your religious stories. Remember. Celebrate. The last 100 years have been a century of cynicism, a century of deconstruction, a century of hero demolition, right? A century of telling us that all those old people were so wrong if they only knew what we know today. And it's the same. We're embarrassed, you know. If you want to know what a civilization is, you just need to look at what you're encouraged to celebrate. And then you know what its values are. You know what its virtues are. So if you've paid attention to what we've been asked to celebrate for about the last 10 years, you will know what is expected of us and what people hope us to become. And so the same as remembering, we have to be deliberate about what it is that we celebrate. And we have to take that seriously. You know, the secular world is almost like an anti-celebration. You know, every day is the same, everything is the same. But the ancient people had cycles of feasting and fasting, cycles of remembering. The very week itself, right? All of your ancestors used to fast at least once a week, right? And all of your ancestors used to celebrate the resurrection of Christ once a week, at least. And so I tell people, go to church, right? And when I say go to church, I do mean go to church. Like, actually, you should go to church. But not just go to church. What I'm calling for is celebrate. Celebrate the things you love. Celebrate your family, right? Take all those opportunities you have. When people become cynical about Christmas, about Easter, when people start becoming cynical about your national holiday, don't listen to them. Their life sucks. They hate the world. Like they're on the very verge of despair. It's like Christmas is amazing. We should celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. We should celebrate his resurrection. You should celebrate your national holidays. Look for reasons. The ancient people, they had so many days off in the Middle Ages. It's crazy. Like a third of the year they had off because they were always celebrating some saint, some feast, something. Obviously we're not going to get to the Middle Ages. But what I mean is that every single day when you sit at the table with your family and you put a meal on the table and you pray to bless the food, think of it as an act of celebration. Think of it as a mini little liturgy, right? A mini little mass where you're offering your attention, you bless the food, you pray for it, and then you sit together and you celebrate this time in your family. So every day can have a little moment of celebration. But this is really different. If sitting on the couch with your snack, watching a movie is the opposite of celebration. And like I said, I do that once in a while. It's okay to do that once in a while, but to do that every day, to do that all the time, right? We've inverted the hierarchy of what it is that should be taking up our attention. We've flipped it. Like there's nothing wrong with relaxing and humor. People used to go to the carnival, used to go to the circus. All these things have always been around. But the main things that we celebrate are the ones that are important to us. And so I call on you to remember to celebrate. And then create. Now, the reason why I have create as the third thing is because what I'm asking for, what I'm hoping for, is that we understand this as being downstream from the first two. Right? We've been lied to for 100 years. That to create is to be original. To create is to be different from everybody else. To create is to express yourself, right? I want to express something far more than myself. I want to express something that I can share with others that they will recognize as having value. I want to create the things that help others celebrate and help others remember what it is to be human, what it means to be part of this world, how it is that I got here. The ancient people, when they thought of art, they didn't think of the way we think of it now in terms of how can we make something original and disturbing that will surprise someone, right? Art used to be, the way we understand art used to be a civic act. When you put up a statue in the city, when you pay to make a statue of some fallen soldier, of some person that did a great thing, this is an act of remembrance and celebration. Right? And this is actually what most visual art or most music or most poems used to be. When you read a modern art critic, they read medieval poetry and they complain because it's only panegyric. Panegyric means they complain because all it does is celebrate, right? All it does is celebrate saints and celebrate God's creation and celebrate God. Ooh, it's so boring. Can't we have a little more cynicism, like a little more edge? We need edgy things, It's fine. We've had 100 years of edginess. It's not like there's no room for it. There's function for it, but we're so saturated with cynicism and sarcasm and irony. It's like, let's create things that participate in our remembering and our celebration. And what's interesting is that, once again, I think we have an amazing opportunity right now, because there's a funny thing about cynicism and deconstruction and irony, is that you can only make fun of something for so long, because at some point, people start to forget why it's important enough to make fun of it, right? So you can only make fun of the church of Christianity for so long. Because wait, who cares? Why are you making fun of this? Why do you keep attacking this thing? So even in the process of irony and cynicism and kind of wittiness, hidden in there is actually sincerity is hidden in there. They need sincerity to be subtle and sophisticated. And so now I think is the time for sincerity. I think now is the time to remember to celebrate. And so when people look at what I do, they're often confused at the outset, because especially when they try to describe what it is I do. So it's like you make icons for churches, but you're also publishing fairy tales. We're publishing fairy tales. You're publishing, graphic novels, and you're doing all these conferences. And what's going on? How is this related? Well, it's because of what I told you. It's because I think the first thing we need to create, remember, celebrate is towards God. That's how it starts. We have to remember the most important thing. Not a thing, but the most important is, of course, our relationship to God. And then from that flows all kinds of things that you can do and you can create. And that's why I spent several years, entering into the world of icon making and serving the church and making images for the church. But then I always knew from the beginning that I wanted to go into the language of the church and into the language of this celebration and see how it is we can then connect it to this weird, broken, postmodern world. And so how can we take that which is the most important, the most celebrated, and how can we present it, or let's say translate it in a manner that can participate in the world today? And so this is why we are publishing fairy tales. Because fairy tales, let's say if you have a hierarchy and you had the lives of the saints and of course scripture and the highest, a little downstream from that, you have the stories that we've been telling for thousands of years, that we've been remembering for thousands of years. And once again, Disney has has been the let's say guarantor of these fairy tales for about 100 years now, maybe a little less than 100 years. No, I think it's 100 years at this point. So for about 100 years since they made close to 100 years until they made Snow White, the first Snow White, and then since then we've seen them as the ones that held these fairy tales for us. Now they fell into the very seduction of everything that I've been telling you about. They became subtle and cynical, and they started to deconstruct the fairy tales, started to turn them upside down, started to make them say the opposite of what the original fairy tales were. But it went so far that at some point no one cares anymore, right? When they made the live action Snow White, it was a complete flop because wait, what? Why do we care about this again? If all you're doing is using it to be cynical and to make political commentary and to do that. And so they don't want those stories anymore. They just don't want them. So we should just take them. We should take them back because they're beautiful, because they're amazing, right? And we now have the opportunity to retell these stories without cynicism, right? To tell them in that joyful, celebratory tone, that they always were part of. And so one of the things we're doing is going completely against the grain of what AI is. So if AI is doing something, we're going to make books that are absolutely beautiful, that are heirloom objects, that have, infinite amount of time planned into all the illustrations, all the patterns in the story and the illustration, how it all goes together. We're going to dive deeply into our language, into the visual language. And so using tropes that are very ancient, that are part of the ancient Christian language of visual art. So if you look at the image on the left, you have the repose, you have the falling asleep of Mary, of the Mother of God. And then on the other side, you can see an illustration from our Snow White book where we use a similar composition. There's something that we bring into the image and we make it about the death of Snow White's mother. And so these are subtle, but this deep language has a reality to it that is beyond my capacity to express myself. It has a resonance that even if I don't understand how it works, it doesn't matter, right? Because it has been transmitted for so long through so many generations that it has in it the very pattern of human attention. So this is why we're doing what we're doing. But the reason why I'm just showing you these different versions of our fairy tales here, you can see the Jack and the Beanstalk. So we're also doing kind of graphic novels that are more fantastical, but are still involved in remembering, we have St. Christopher and St. George and all of these saints that are in this adventure story. So instead of telling a kind of, I love Tolkien, don't get me wrong. I love C.S. Lewis. I think they're amazing, but I think that now is the time to remember the actual stories, right? In the Middle Ages, they had an entire romance tradition, which is that they would tell stories, fictionalized stories of the great characters of history, of the saints, of the legends that surround the Bible. And they would tell these beautiful fictional versions they had these plays that would go around the villages, right? The mystery plays, where they would do the entire history of creation from Adam and Eve to the end of the world in these plays that were being put up in the villages. And this was the people's entertainment. And so obviously there was fictionalization, there was humor, there was all of this part of it, but it wasn't fiction in the way that we think of Star Wars today. It was an act of participation and an act of remembering. And so I started out my talk with a little bit of despair. And we should understand the stakes. The stakes are huge. Not only do we have a culture that is decomposing in general, but with AI, we have a kind of threat that we've never really seen, at least that we know of in the history of humanity. But this time is an opportunity. And no matter what happens, Whether the AI becomes more powerful and starts to take over, whether it collapses because it's unsustainable and we have a crisis because of that, no matter what happens in the next decade, those that have fostered what it is to be truly human are the ones that will come out of it. And so that's the challenge that I pose to all of you, which is that so much, and it's you know what? You want to talk about an adventure? It's extremely difficult what I'm asking all of us to do, because the entire world is screaming the other way. The entire world is saying, just keep scrolling, dude. Just don't worry about this. But it is also an opportunity, right? Those of you that will have in their hearts, that will have the wisdom that is brought to you in Scripture, in the great stories, in the great myths, in the great philosophers, those are the ones that will be bright in the future. There's no doubt about it. And so that is my encouragement to you as parents, as students, as teachers, is to really think of it as a great adventure that is happening to us. And, we need to get through the chaos so we can carry that light to the next generation as well. And so thank you.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your talk. And it was so much to process, so much to talk about. And of course, what everyone's thinking about, as you said, is the new encyclical the Pope was talking about. And so there's a lot of pessimism, as you were saying, about the future of humanity in the age of AI. And, do you find that this pessimism is
Like justified?
justified? Sorry.
No worries.
Thank you.
So I'm all okay. I'm all for pessimism, 100% for pessimism, as long as the pessimism is a motor for change. There's no reason to despair, there's no reason to worry. Christ himself told us not to worry. And so we shouldn't worry. We should not be idiots. We should know what's going on. Like if there's an enemy at the gate, you should know that there's an enemy at the gate. And I think that the pessimism in the sense of seeing the wave that's coming is the opportunity for us to be ready for it and to be the best person to take on that wave. One of the big challenges we have is that this enemy or this threat that's coming towards us, it doesn't present itself as an enemy, right? It presents itself as your friend, as your servant, as the one that will make you more powerful. And so for that reason, it's more difficult to resist, or it's more difficult to know how to act, because we like to think that an enemy is someone that comes at your door with a sword. And so right? He's like, well, there it is. I get my sword, I'm going to go fight that enemy. But now it's more like, hey, I can give you everything you want and you'll never have to do anything again. That's the enemy that we're being presented with. And we know that it can completely destroy us. And so the type of will and the type of discipline we have to be able to muster is very different. And that's why it's almost like a bigger challenge for us. It's almost like it's a bigger adventure, because it also is fighting our own passions, fighting our own desires in order to confront it. So,
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the 3 solutions, I would say, to this problem AI poses, which is remembrance, celebration, and creation. And how would you say education, how can this be transmitted practically in schools and in the family unit?
yeah. And so, education is exactly the kind of place that this needs to be embedded in, which is that, the reason why we remember, right? It's in the word. The word remember means to bring things back together, right? To connect them together. And one of the problems we have is that even our education, even the way that we're being taught history, is discontinuous. it's fragmentary. And so to remember is to express the world as continuity, right? Understand that the world is best expressed as continuity. And that is what education is. Education is continuity. Education is one generation saying, I have this wisdom, I have this knowledge, I can show you what it's like to be a better person, and I'm going to transmit that to you. And the fact that education has become this weird, discontinuous, fragmented thing is a complete aberration on what it actually is. It's actually far more natural for education to be remembering and to be an act of continuation. And so that's one. So what does it mean? It means that embed the things you teach. Don't teach things completely devoid of their connection. All the arts are connected to each other. But there's a golden thread which runs through all of the different disciplines that we learn. And so bring them together, right? Do not wrench knowledge out of its continuity and present it as raw facts for a young person to just learn, because who knows why they're even learning it, right? And so that's one. In terms of celebration, it's the same. Your children don't need your cynicism. Like, your students do not need your cynicism. There's so much cynicism. Everything is dripping in cynicism. Approach the things you're teaching them with sincerity. Approach the history, the texts, the people that you're talking about with sincerity, right? Instead of constantly deconstructing and being cynical. It's so, we've been so ruined. Like, it's so easy to do that. But that is too. And in terms of creation, realize that everything we teach our children is so that they can live in the future. That's why we are teaching them. They will have to do the same thing that you did. You are teaching them, you are transmitting, you're giving them this baton so that they can then take it and then give it to the next generation. And so that is how we need to, so as you're teaching the children, the young people, you have to help them become the kind of person that can then give the baton to the next generation. And that's something that should be embedded all the time in everything that we do, right? Those three aspects, at least that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. There's certain, in education, I was talking to a couple of professors of mine, and they are very, wary and pessimistic about AI, especially in the work that students turn in, right? And a solution that they have is oral.
Yeah.
Oral exams, oral presentations. And so it's this sort of going back to this medieval, thinking of, passing on oral traditions and speaking properly, all these things that come. And so how could you elaborate more on that, on the oral tradition?
In the Middle Ages, oral examination was the main type of examination, right? The way that you would test the student's knowledge is that they would come into the room and you would ask them questions for 2-3 hours, whatever, and they would have to answer the questions. I don't think we can get around that, because if you think your students aren't using AI to write their papers, of course they're using AI to write their papers. Why wouldn't they use AI to write their papers? And so we have to change the way that we think about this. There's if you want the children to learn, you're going to have to change the way you think about this, or else you're really going to be teaching in a void. Like, there's no other way to look at it. Mm-hmm. So oral examination, in class, handwritten, papers, all of this is going to have to come back. There's no other way around it. But in the end, I think that it is going to help us acquire what it is that education was there in the first place. Because obviously the expectations might be less, but whatever a person has inside of them, right, that is worth 5 times what they can find in an encyclopedia. Right? It's worth so much more than what they can go out into the library and find. There's nothing, of course, we need to learn to be able to look for references and to go and do our research and do that, of course. but what they have inside them will always be worth so much more. And so that's why I think that going towards oral examinations and these kinds of things, I mean, it's going to happen anyways. There's going to be no way around it, because, like I said, that everybody's using it. So, and the teachers are using it too.
Yeah.
My daughter has a teacher. It's insane, and he is the ethics teacher of all people. And he doesn't even lie about it. He uses ChatGPT to generate all his course content, all his quizzes, all his tests. And then worse than that he encourages the students to use ChatGPT to do the work. And so I also suspect that he corrects them with ChatGPT. And so my sense is that it's a complete loop. Like, it's a full internal loop where no one teaches, no one learns, but everybody gets grades, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems a lot that students, teachers, employers are focused on a means, or not a means, but the end, money, power, to what you were saying. So this does seem, to what you're saying, the Moloch trap.
Yeah.
And so just, I think a question that some of us might have is, how much can we participate in or use AI without falling into this trap? What is really the practicality of this and the morality of it all?
I mean, I think that we have to always understand. So let's even take that. Let's say the ends are the purpose, right? If the end is a person, right, in the sense that the end is the lifting up and the making of someone who is, living in a relationship with God and with others, has wisdom, discernment, all of that, then everything should be geared towards that. And so, to the extent that you can use AI to get there, whatever, fine. But the obsession that we have with this machine is the problem. We've completely reverted the order of what it should be. I use AI basically as a research assistant. That's how I use AI. And so, other people will have different ways they use it, but that's how I do it. And then I always check what it gives me. But if I need to remember instead of going to the library, when we were young, we'd go to the library and go through the stacks and then find the reference and go get the reference book and then copy the thing and get the journal. Like, it was a huge, elaborate process. That process probably has value in itself. I agree. But that's the way that I use AI, basically, is as a research assistant. But the problem with that is you can only use it as a research assistant if you already have enough inside of you to be able to discern what it's giving you. So that's why I think that for young people, it's probably best to keep it at bay as much as possible for as long as possible, so that you can build up the person that will have the wisdom to use it. Because we're not going to get away from AI. We shouldn't be naive. We're not going to just avoid it. We're going to have to use it. Some of us are going to have to use it, and we're going to have to figure out how. But the only way to figure out how is to build up that person. And so that's why I'm focusing on that. Like, if you are someone who worships, who cares for their spouse, for their children, who has a community around them, then you will be a person that will be less prone to falling into AI psychosis, and being completely drawn into the monster.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about usefulness, something that's very mysterious to us is the cave art, right? It seems like it doesn't serve a purpose, especially for these people millions of years ago that are in the wilderness surviving, and then they just went into caves in the dark to do art, right? In the modern mind, it doesn't seem like there's a purpose to that, especially because they had millions of other things to worry about, like food, finding shelter, we assume, right? So, what does cave art tell us about the relationship between man and art? Is Chesterton correct in saying that art is the signature of man? And again, how can we tie that back into our understanding of this new technology, AI?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because we don't know what those images are for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to speculate, what they're for. But my intuition about cave art is that it probably did serve a purpose. It was probably storytelling
Mm-hmm.
and common memory. And so if there was like a hunt or something, then you would have these images. You would go together in the cave and you would remember this event that happened. It was probably in that way a form of externalization of memory, in the same way that books are externalizations of memory. And so I think that is in some ways all of human activity, all of human techne or art in the broad sense is that, right? It is in some ways an externalization of the human. So to say that it's a signature is a good idea, is a good way of seeing it, that it is the externalization of the person into inanimate means, right? So that's what a book is, right? You kind of externalize memory into the book. You externalize power into these objects that you use that make you stronger, like to farm or to do whatever. But it's important to understand that that's also what AI is. AI is also that. It's just that, just like everything we do, like we always have to find a balance. And so it was true before, right? So Shakespeare is amazing, right? And poetry is amazing, and a beautiful novel about love is amazing. But everybody knows that stuffy professor that is a complete psychotic, but just reads books all day and reads about everybody else's experience, but has no internal true experience. So the danger of AI psychosis has always that type of falling into the externalization of human experience has always been there. Plato warns us about it in the Phaedrus. This is how old this problem is, which is that if you externalize memory, then you forget, right? And so how do we find the balance? And we've always had to find the balance. So we have a novel that gives us a love story. What it's supposed to be is supposed to be something like a test case, right? For you to have an experience and learn about those emotions and kind of come close to them, see what they do to you, so you can train yourself without suffering, right? So that you can encounter these things in real life. And so ultimately, this is what AI has to be a version of that too. It's just that the more you increase the power of the externalization, the more tempting it is to be sucked into it, right? And to be drawn into it and to inverse the relationship. Instead of understanding it as something that serves us, because it serves us, we start to serve it, right? Because it gives us something, we start to treat it like something that has to be a standard for everything else. And so I think that we have to have a certain amount of wisdom in understanding that the problems that AI is bringing are problems that have been there from the very beginning of time in terms of human techne. It's just that the scale at which it's bringing the problem is so big that we've never seen that level.
Mm-hmm. If we could pivot to, creativity, art has become synonymous with originality. Creativity is thought as inventing something new, as you were saying in your talk. Is there a difference between inventing something new and creating?
Yes. So we are not God. Uh, Everything that we create is a subset of reality. We cannot make anything new. There's no possibility of making something that is absolutely new. And it's kind of ridiculous to want to do that. We can in some ways create things that have a relative amount of novelty, but we will find, if we know a little bit more, that someone else has done it before. There's almost no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
In the first century, there was this fashion in Rome, which was that some of the mosaics on the floors of houses, on the mosaics, what they would portray was the residues of a party. And so on the mosaic, there were like broken bits of food and bones and like fish bones and stuff. And that's what the floor mosaic was. Floor mosaic was just a bunch of decomposing residues of an imaginary feast. So all the contemporary artists, they think they're doing something new. Like this was 2,000 years ago. It's just the exact same gesture of deconstruction that was done in the decadent times of the Roman Republic. And so my sense about novelty, the way that I think about it in terms of creation, let's say art or literature or music, is that it's neutral. Right? Novelty should serve a purpose. If you're going to do something, it should serve something. So some novelties are interesting, some novelties aren't. There's a big mistake in thinking that novelty is a value in itself. Novelty is not a value in itself. And so humans should create things that are true, that are good, that are beautiful. And even if you create something ugly, sometimes you have to create something ugly, but you should always kind of understand it in a manner that is serving ultimately that which is true, good, and beautiful. There are plenty of images of human depravity in the Bible, but they are always structured in a manner that is there to remind us and to help us participate in that which is good. So it doesn't mean that we can't have art or culture that portrays things that are painful or difficult, but it always has to be, and you can tell when something is serving the good and when it's just perversion.
Mhm. Do you think that people today are stifled, or do you think that people today are stifled by, the strict rules in art? When you're creating something beautiful, Plato says that, or yeah, that there's orderly, it's harmonious, right? A lot of people scoff at this and think, well, that just stifles my potential and what my art could be, right? And so why do you think we've sort of taken a look of, beauty is at the eye of the beholder, it has no definition, right? Why do you think we've gotten here and artists seem to be holding this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of like actual, let's say studio art or gallery art, there's a kind of lie. There's a kind of lie about the idea that it breaks all the rules. There are very strong rules in the world of contemporary art, and it's really the rules of the market and the rules of the elites that decide who gets shown in a gallery and who gets that. You can't really get away from it. That there's this weird thing where breaking rules, there's always been people to break rules. Like this has always been around. Like we had court jesters for a reason, because you need someone poking at the system a little bit, kind of, showing that the system is imperfect, because you don't want to create a Tower of Babel, right? You don't want to have systems of meaning or systems of culture that are so completely, total that it feels like everything is there. So you always have had, in the entire history of culture, you always had something that would come and poke at the system, right? And so the only problem we have now is that we've completely upended the entire hierarchy. Is that we've decided that the thing that pokes at the system is the system. How did we get there? How do we have a tradition of iconoclasm? Like, how do we have a tradition of breaking rules? You have an entire industry of rock and roll that is supposedly breaking the rules, but it's like it's not breaking any rules anymore. It's just repeating a gesture of breaking rules just to attract attention. So at this point, the entire culture has become ridiculous. I mean, look at like in a music award show. It's like their Satanism is so boring. It's like, again with the witches. It's like you're just trying to get my attention. It's just so boring. Whew. And so what we need now is I think what we need is what I said, is that we actually now need to constrain. We need to remember. We need to to celebrate something that's good. And that is, it's funny because it's ironic, is that now actually doing that becomes the last rebellion. It's like the only way to rebel against a system that is so systematically upside down is to do something right side up, right? And so it's like you just turn back.
So you were talking about remembering, and obviously we want to remember the past, our lineage, where we come from, how we got here, right? But when people try to remember, or they try to think about the Middle Ages, it's still very, they think of it as dark, unevolved, just those backwards people, right? And so how can we bring to the general public, to students, this new outlook on the Middle Ages, and how to, bring back this true remembrance and not some false narrative of what the Middle Ages were?
So I think this is like a secret. Okay. So in the age of the Greek, like say the Athenian empires and all of the Greek moments that we know about in history, their gods and their mythology came from an age that was gone, right? It came from an age that was obscure to them. And this is actually how it kind of works. It's kind of interesting. And so one of the things that happened is that when the people in the Enlightenment invented the concept of the Dark Ages and invented the concept of the Middle Ages as this horrible, dark, superstitious place, what they ended up doing is that they put all of our mythological thinking into that time, right? That's why if you think of a fairy tale, what do you see? Do you see modern skyscrapers in a fairy tale? Do you see, the Eiffel Tower or whatever? No, you see castles and knights and kings and dragons. And so while the people were telling you that the Middle Ages is this dark, stupid, ridiculous, superstitious thing, it was actually becoming the place of storytelling for the modern world. That's why Tolkien is so successful, because Tolkien understood that. He understood that the Middle Ages is the place where the stories have accumulated, right? And so we actually have, if we know that, if we're aware of that, we actually have an amazing opportunity. First thing, stop apologizing for the Middle Ages, right? And then be bold about it, right? Be bold about the story of Saint Denis that got his head cut off and picked it up and walked down the hill with his head in his hands, right? Be bold about the story of Saint Margaret, who was swallowed by a dragon and escaped the dragon with her cross. Like, let's not be shy about these stories. Stop, because people are literally watching Game of Thrones to get that experience when we have the real thing and we're ashamed of it and we're not talking about it. And so we need to, first of all, we need to remember. Nobody remembers. We've forgotten all these stories. Did you know that the story of Alexander the Great was the most popular medieval romance? Did you know that? No, nobody knows that. People don't know these stories. There are thousands, sadly, there are thousands of books that have never been translated. But we could at least go into the stories. Read the Golden Legend. Like, there are such amazing stories in that. And so I think that so some of the things we did, so if you saw in my presentation, I presented one of our graphic novels. It's called God's Dog. And in this graphic novel, what we did is we took all the things that Christians are embarrassed about. So like dragons and giants and the saints that the Catholic Church had kind of set to the side, like St. George and St. Christopher. We have St. Simeon the Stylite, who stands on a pole for his entire life. And we just took all of these wild things that are in our tradition, and we just said, you know what? That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about that because it's so fascinating and exciting, and everybody has forgotten about it. And so, yeah, I think that we actually have an amazing opportunity. when we have this treasure that nobody knows about, right? That's the opportunity to talk about it. So I would say, remember, and you'll see, go in there, read. I mean, I'm sure all of you here are reading Beowulf and are reading, the Anglo-Saxon poems and are reading all of these are reading the Eddas and are reading all of that, but nobody, do you think people know the stories of the Eddas? They're amazing. People don't know them. And so I think it's the time to tell these stories again.
Mhm. So, what's the difference between reading these stories and going into the world of these stories versus watching a movie and being entertained by them? In both scenarios, it seems you're receiving a narrative.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with movies. I watch movies like all of you. I don't want to be careful. I'm not like a weird cultural Puritan or whatever. It's fine. You can watch anime or movie, whatever. Like that's not the point. There is a qualitative difference between, first of all, a story that is your story and a story that you only consume, right? So you cannot be a Jedi, right? You know that, I hope. You can be a saint, right? So the every story of every saint is your story, right? You cannot, again, you're not going to be a Harry Potter wizard, right? It's just not going to happen. But you can definitely be someone who is remembered by your family, by your nation, by your parish, as someone who contributed to that life. And so that's what I mean. And so I think that that's the first step, right? And so understanding that is number one. Understanding that when I read the Bible, I'm reading my story. These are my stories. They're not something that I'm just studying or being entertained by. Now, if we're going to make plays and movies and operas or whatever, my call for people is to say, at least now, at this moment, why not make them about your stories? Why not use those as an opportunity to remember, right, and to participate? So it's a second degree participation, but it still is. And ultimately, it's really the difference between liturgy and entertainment. Right? The top aspect of what I'm talking to you about is liturgy. It's going to church and entering into that story. When you go to church, right, and you participate in the Eucharist, you are entering into a story, right? You are entering into Christ's story, and you are participating in that story. And you're entering into a cosmic story because you're also looking to the age to come and to the heavenly Jerusalem and to the revelation of everything. This is real, right? This is a story that we can be part of. And so that's what I'm calling people to see, to participate in that difference. So,
So,
thank you. Sorry to cut you off there. But we're just going to open up questions to the floor now. I believe supposed to get a mic somehow, but I believe that our art teacher from Chesterton is going to lead off.
Hi. Uh, yeah, so I'll just pull one off of my my script here. The great Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn said beauty would save the world, but in the early 20th century, Picasso dismissed beauty altogether. There's, I guess, two questions underneath this. Can you help us understand why beauty was dismissed from art? And then we know people hunger for beauty. How is it then that our built environment is often so ugly?
yeah, I mean, I think that it is downstream from rejecting God. I don't know how else to say it. In the sense that, when you try to grab a lower good, right, and you try to grab it for itself, even when you try to grab beauty for itself, right? If beauty doesn't serve something higher, you just try to grab it. What happens is it starts to devolve, and then beauty isn't interesting enough, and so you start to move towards more, you could say, strange experiences and strange desires. And that's what we see in the modern world is a kind of fascination with that which is strange and broken, right? A fascination with difference. And so this is what the entire modern kind of experience is. And so this is what and that's part of novelty too. It's like this idea that novelty has value in itself. I think it really is ultimately downstream from God, and it's related also to individualism, right? This movement away from us being together towards idiosyncratic expressions. So what you have is that the modern artist is more and more idiosyncratic in that he is supposed to express himself in difference from others. So what do you think happens when you start to constantly emphasize how I'm different from you all the time over iterations? Well, you end up with something that is ugly because beauty is that which binds us, right? Beauty is that which we have in common, that we see and we recognize. The shock of the different and the shock of the new and the shock of the, these are things that in some way that you could say are expressions of our separation, but they're kind of, you could understand it as an expression of an experience of alienation in itself. Okay? So when I look at something that's repulsive, I am alienated. But that's the thing is that it's not like there's not some kind of weird perverse pleasure in that repulsion, right? But that's happening everywhere, right? So it's like, if I emphasize difference, then I'm going to end up with something that is also exemplifying repulsion. Does that make sense? Can you kind of see what I'm saying? I mean, it's hard to square it, but these are analogous in terms. So it's not surprising that they happen simultaneously in our culture. That while we're emphasizing idiosyncrasy and kind of individualism, that we are also exploring things that are repulsive.
Jonathan,
Right here. Yeah.
what's your favorite piece of art in your home?
Oh my. So I mean, I know the favorite piece of art in my home is, I'm very, very fortunate. I have an icon which is painted by my very favorite artist. His name is Father Silouan Justiniano, and he painted an absolutely astounding image of the woman in Revelation as the Mother of God, obviously. And so it's just this beautiful image with the dragon underneath, that's catching all the stars, and she's standing in glory with wings. It's like it's really beautiful.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you very much for your talk.
Good second.
In Magnifica Humanitas, one point I found interesting was the Pope's call for investing in education to build artisans to guide education. And in classical education, we all know about the Socratic method, where you ask penetrating questions to help purge the person's understanding. Now, some argue that AI can help with this as an interlocutor. And indeed, if you use AI in a certain way, it can generate some very piercing and interesting questions. But I also wonder, with Socrates and in his dialogues, his presence as a human being, I think, also had power. And those who spoke to him, it seems, could feel the weight of his love toward the truth. That's something, that presence and that love is not something that AI has. So I'm wondering about your thoughts about the use to be good artisans of this technology, as the Pope has called for, the use of AI as educators in the Socratic method specifically, but also in education more broadly.
I'm going to be pretty clear. Like, I'm going to be pretty radical with this. I think you should never use AI as an interlocutor. You should just never do that. And the reason is it's not just like just a moral grandstanding, is because the way that these systems make money is with your attention. That's how they make money. It's just like social media. They monetize your attention. And therefore, in the AI is the desire to keep you using it. That's why ChatGPT is sycophantic. That's what leads to AI psychosis, is because the AI is trying to keep you on so that you keep paying that money every month. And therefore, it is the worst interlocutor. because it is sycophantic. There's something in it that's trying to keep you hooked on its answer. And so it's constantly cajoling you, constantly telling you you're so brilliant, you're so genius. And it has brought in insanely intelligent people, great mathematicians, to the brink of insanity, getting them to believe that they had solved some huge mathematical thing that no one had solved for, hundreds of years because of that. And so seriously, do not use AI as an interlocutor. Don't ask it to give you advice. Don't tell it your problems. None of that, all of that stuff is going to lead you into a psychosis. Don't ask it to interpret your theological opinions. Don't use it as a guarantor of reality. If you go on X right now, people use Grok as if he's God. They appeal to Grok. Have you noticed? If you use X, they're like, Grok, discern for us what is true. And then Grok yields its judgment. My goodness. It's like, this is the worst. This is the really, really dangerous. And therefore, like, if and they want you. So it's like, if you have young people that have access to AI, they have to really learn to not ask AI for its opinion, because that will lead them down a very, very dark path. So anyway, that's my take. And so, like I said, use it as an encyclopedia. Use it as a way to use it. I mean, even you could use it to do tasks, but don't use it as your friend. Like, AI is not your friend. It's not your teacher.
Hello, Jonathan. I'd like to know what's the value, in your opinion, in teaching classical languages like Latin and ancient Greek in high schools like they used to do in the past? Thank you.
Yeah, I sadly have not been I've not been lucky enough to have that. I think if it's possible, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. First of all, learning languages forms your thought. It actually participates in your capacity to think. And so, because Greek and Latin are at the sources even of our modern languages, it's also an act of remembering. You'll learn more. I remember I had a friend, a boomer friend, who was forced to learn Latin when he was young, and he was complaining about it. He had to learn Latin. And I asked him if his French was better than his daughter's French. And he was like, of course it is. And I said, do you think learning Latin helped your French? And he was like, well, of course it helped my French. And so it's like, these are the sources of our languages. And so if we can help our young people go into them, and see them as a wellspring for what we are going through now, I think we should definitely do it. Yeah.
Hey, Jonathan. I think as a young artist, there's always this like weird balance between wanting to pursue your passion in art, but also wanting kind of the monetary gain from making art. And I'm wondering, like, how do you balance those two? Like, as someone like in your position now, looking backwards.
So I would say that you should always be asking, what is this serving more than anything else? You should, if you're going to make objects that you're going to put out into the world, or music or whatever, you should always ask yourself, not whether it's your passion, but what is this serving? And that's the balance that you need to find. The money part of it, that will actually probably come into, surprisingly, it'll probably come into line as well, because your passions should not be your guide, right? Passions are like a motor, right? Passions are like an energy, right? They should not be followed. They should be mastered towards a purpose, right? They're like the drive, but the drive in itself is, what is that? Who cares? Like, where are you going? That's the question. And so if you have a kind of passion in art, you should always ask yourself, what can this serve? And that, I mean, that, and obviously it doesn't have to be 100% clear right at the outset, but you should always be kind of moving in that direction. And the great thing about that is, in general, when something serves a good, other people are interested in it, other people want it, and other people want to participate and help you do that. And so that type of art is actually the type that can be monetized. It sounds very practical, but if you're doing something completely idiosyncratic that no one cares about and that is not, it's just completely in your own little closed off world, then obviously convincing someone to care about it. But if you're doing something in the service, I mean, an example, in my case, for example, my solution to that was, I'm going to make images for the church. It's maybe it's even too easy a solution. It's like, I can make images that will participate in people's life. Like, I can make an icon, and that person, and someone will give it to their, to a newly baptized child, and that child will grow up with that icon their entire life. My goodness, that's amazing. That's like the best thing ever, And so that, for me, at least, was the solution. There are other solutions. There are other ways of doing it, but I think that the idea that you're there to serve others is probably what you should submit your creativity to. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I think we've talked a little bit about work and the purpose of work and education. I was kind of curious, not just about how we spend our time, but also how we're not spending our time. And I remember seeing a video a while ago, and they're talking about the importance of boredom in imagination. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about maybe the purpose of rest, silence, boredom, along those lines, and
yeah,
creativity.
that's very important. And this is actually going to be a confession I'm going to say right now, which is, I get my best ideas in church. It's actually like you always have to fight them off, because you're supposed to like come into silence, and just be, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I don't know, all these great ideas coming in. It's like, no. So I totally agree. I think that one of the problems that modern parenting has is that they always think that children should be always entertained and always busy. I think that's absolute danger. Kids should get bored. It's very important. You should just let them get bored. First of all, it gives them it will give them an impetus for something else. And it also just leaves them in that space where something can appear. Because this is the problem, is that we don't think up our own ideas, right? It's like they don't actually come from us. We're not sure, it's not hard to know how completely that works, but you can't will creativity, and so that's why, I definitely think that, and you can coax that. A lot of people, a lot of great thinkers or even scientists and everything, they would coax that. So they would, the story, I forget which scientist, who would fall asleep holding a ball in his hand, right? I think it was Einstein used to do that. And so he would just fall asleep with the ball, and then obviously when they fall asleep, they would drop the ball, and then they would wake up, and then in that moment, like, they would have ideas in that like kind of liminal space. Anyways, so you can. But traveling is good. Car rides, like for kids, that's great. Like, no screens in the car. Like, you just have them sit there, look outside. That's good stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Pajot, for a really great conversation. I'm really interested in your discussion of re-enchantment, post-irony, and sincerity. And I don't like to be skeptical of this, especially given what you've said, but I guess I wonder, is this actually possible to do in a self-conscious or intentional way, especially since the cultures, like medieval times that you're drawing from, in a lot of your own examples, we're doing this in a very natural, organic, unself-conscious way in the ways that they engage with remembering and celebration? Thank you.
That's a great question. And it's probably coming from someone who is thinking about art and thinking about culture. And so there are different solutions to that. Like my first solution was church. That was my first solution because there's the place where nothing is cynical, but there's a place where everything is still, it's the one place in the world where you can have, or you need to have pure sincerity, that there's no room for cynicism. And so in some ways, I would say that I train my psyche in that context, which is like, what is that's going on here? What is it that's here? And so from that, what I started to realize, and this is a lot of the work that I'm doing now, is you need a little bit of irony especially when you're going to do something like telling stories, but you just have to know what place it has. So this is one of the problems that's happened. So a lot of the people have, in reacting to modernism, for example, like the Christian movie, like they're so bad. Like the Christian movies are so bad, right? Because they have a kind of sincerity that is performative and that lacks suffering in it. Like it lacks a little bit of that, of the things that's off. And so I always think of gargoyles on medieval churches, that you need a little bit of the subtlety on the edges, but it has to be on the edges. So when you're thinking about creating something, how do you integrate the deconstruction just enough, right? Well, that's one of the reasons why Shakespeare is still so brilliant, is because he's got that in there, right? So he has a kind of sincerity, but he always has characters that are self-referential and that are deconstructing the play. But it's not the main character, for goodness sake, right? It's something that skirts the edge. And so if you look at a medieval manuscript page, right, you'll have an image of the Annunciation, right? And then you'll have someone riding a snail fighting a dog, in the edges. And it's totally fine. But you don't have the guy fighting the snail in the middle and the Annunciation on the edges. You just are able to find the right balance. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Hello, Mr. Pezzo. I'd like to ask you about a problem I see arising whenever I think about AI and the future of AI and how we should fight or wrestle with AI. And it's about remembering and celebrating and creating, and how the different traditions need to in some ways unite against this machine of division. And I wanted to ask you, how do we keep every tradition with their own specific cohesiveness and personality, and not have this mingling that's ultimately destroys all the traditions?
Yeah. The solution to that is subsidiarity. The solution to that is understanding the place of everything in its place, right? So this is something that modern people, for some reason, it's so confusing to us, right? That I have my family's culture in my house, and we have our own culture, and that culture is kind of the same and kind of different from the neighbors. So when I go to the neighbor's house and I see how they do things, I can rejoice and see that it's nice and it's great, and then I go back home and then I do my thing. And I think that it's not that complicated to know that everything that exists has its own particularity that should exist, and that's completely fine. And there's no reason to abolish it or to mix it or to confuse it in the name of some abstract unity that would exist up in the ether, And that's what we have to start to be able to practice, is to practice subsidiarity, is to know when to engage in the things that bind us at this level, whether it's myself, whether it's my family, whether it's my parish, whether it's, my tradition, whether it's my nation, et cetera, et cetera. And it means that there are ways that we can encounter each other across nations. Definitely. But the idea that that would abolish my nation, that's the dumbest thing ever. Like, why would the fact that I can encounter someone across nations mean that I have to now conform my identity to some weird, ethereal unity? And so that's what I think. So, even the Catholic social doctrine, it has it embedded in its structure, which is this notion of subsidiarity, of understanding that everything has its place and can exist fully in its place and in relationship to others. So we don't have to do that. And so that's why I don't like, I personally don't, can I say this? It's like, I feel very little anxiety about difference, because I kind of know what I am. I kind of know what I believe. I know what binds me to the people around me. So when I encounter difference, I don't feel anxiety about that. I just see, oh, that's how they do it. And now, all right, so I like some of that, but that's not how I do it. I go back to my world. So
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Yes. So thank you for your insight. So maybe my question will be around this when you spoke about discernment between excellence, beauty, and good work. Because I think sometimes in a performative society, we look at an excellent work as a beautiful work, but beauty in itself as humans can be imperfect. So I don't know if you have maybe some insights about that, and yeah, and the way it may be triggering maybe some paralysis or psychosis that you were speaking about. Thank you.
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Could you maybe repeat it
Yes.
a little
So
differently?
maybe because in a performative society, we look at excellence as being the highest goal that we want to reach in each task that we're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And now my question is, okay, so how can you be assured that you're doing a beautiful work, even if that is not in quote excellent as you see it, or maybe perfect
Okay,
as you
yeah.
think it should?
Okay, so this is actually a good, I think if I understand the question correctly, this is actually a very good question, which is that, I used to think that beauty was perfection. And I used to actually think that beauty was balance and harmony, right? And a kind of symmetry. This is when when I was leaving postmodernism and kind of becoming more traditional. So I'm like, yeah, symmetry, perfection and all that. And then as I got older and I started to actually look at the things that humans were making, I realized, no, that's not what's going on. When something is actually too perfect, it actually is frightening. It actually is jarring. It doesn't, if you've ever seen people try to generate fully symmetrical human faces, it's very unsettling, actually. We don't like that. We actually like asymmetry. And this is actually Ian McGilchrist who actually used that term. He said we should aim for asymmetry. And at first I hated that because I thought, aiming for chaos. And he explained, he said, no, he said asymmetry takes symmetry for granted. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So the idea is that underlying symmetry with a little bit of difference is actually what people like to see. And so in terms of what we do, it also, when we say perfection is the enemy of the good, I think that's a good way of understanding that too, right? Which is that we should always do things fittingly to their purpose. We should always do them to the value that they have. And so that will reduce their perfection, but it would also put in them a kind of messiness that we actually enjoy, and so I always think that beauty is the adaptation of a pattern to a particular, right? And that's actually what we find beautiful, not the pattern on its own, and not the idiosyncrasy of the particular, but the joining of the two. So
Hi, thank you so much for the talk you gave. I really liked it a lot. One question I have is, so right now there's a lot of unknown with AI right now. We don't really know what direction we're going at. It's kind of similar when, computers came out, they didn't really know where it was going to go. So I guess my question for you is in the context of, education and, beauty, what's your sort of prediction for where AI is just going to kind of nestle itself, if that makes sense?
I mean, look, it's going to get pretty bad. I was trying to focus on the positive here. We're going to see authoritarianism. There's no way around that. It's a game theory, almost 100% authoritarianism, because, right, either the AI is used by the government to control and to see everything we do, either that, or we all have the equivalent of a nuclear weapon in our pocket, and now the government has to install all these measures to prevent the worst from happening, and therefore we end up with authoritarianism. There's almost no way around this. Think about AI image generation. We absolutely will need an arbiter of reality. There's no choice. What do we do? How are we going to know what's real? So someone will have to be the judge of that reality, and who's going to step in for that? And so it's going to be the very powerful people will step in. And so in terms of what AI is going to bring, it's just a question of time. It will be autonomous drone swarms. There's no other direction that this is going to go. And we have the two, we have the place where this is being developed. It's being developed in the Russia-Ukraine war, and it's going to be developed in the war in the Middle East. These technologies are being done. Anthropic got in trouble with the Department of War in the United States because it refused to fully automize its drones. And the government was pressing them to have fully automated drones that would pick their targets and kill their targets. So this is where we're going, right? Now, in education, it's going to get worse too, because most people are not going to wake up, and we're going to see IQ go down. It's the first generation, I think they were talking about Generation Alpha, is the first generation in history that we know of where the young people's IQ is lower than the previous generation. So this is what's going to happen. Now, again, we could say, oh my, oh me, oh my, doom, oh doom. Or we could say, this is the adventure that we have, right? We have to be the best. We're going to have to be better people. That's the only thing we can do anyways. And so if we are better people, then we will be the type of people that will either be able to resist this, or will be able to not be completely destroyed by its effect on us, that we'll be able to resist the seduction, the control. All of these things, what we need are people that have the wisdom and the discernment to be able to move forward. But it might take longer. I hope it takes as long as possible. But at least now the trajectory with the Moloch trap that we're set in with China is that this is where we're going. Because we're going to at least need drone swarms to prevent the Chinese drone swarms from attacking us, right? So we have drone swarms. There's no other. It's difficult to imagine another future. So sorry, everyone. This was the last question too. This end on a total downer.
This is Sarah from Hamilton. The imagery of Isaiah is overwhelming. Fire, stone, seed, life and death. What does it have to do with Christ? Join me for my course, The Fifth Gospel, to discover how to read Isaiah in terms of its native language, symbolism. When we read that language along the textual structure of the book, we find the story of Christ, the God who became man to elevate man to divine glory. And we find that story both in Isaiah's most famous passages and in his most obscure ones. The course starts on June 15th and can be attended live or at your convenience. I hope to see you there.